Hello everybody, DF here. Welcome to Beauties and Beasts, a podcast of all things Beauty and the Beast. So, we've covered a few of the Danish author Hans Christian Andersen's fairy tales on this podcast. The Snow Queen, The Little Mermaid, The Ugly Duckling. That last one is for patrons only. And Andersen might possibly be my favorite traditional fairy tale writer. Sure, Charles Perrault and the Brothers Grimm get all the limelight, but Andersen's stories, I feel, have deeper characterization and social themes. Now, it was only after I did my Little Mermaid episode that I learned that Andersen was, in actuality, in love with not just women, but a couple of men as well, and it's quite possible that he was on the asexual spectrum. Before aces were given an actual term, of course. Which changes the meaning of his stories entirely. Now, Andersen tends to write about misfits, characters who don't fit in the world they're born in, from an ugly duckling to a mermaid who wants legs, and they go and seek acceptance in a new world. Some of them end happily, with the ugly duckling realizing he's a beautiful swan and he finds true family. But Andersen's mostly famous for his stories ending in death. Primarily suicide. Examples are The Little Mermaid, The Steadfast Tin Soldier, as a way to show that the only way certain people who are different can find true happiness and acceptance is in death. Depressing, I know, but hey, if I was a biromantic ace in the 19th century, I'd have those suicidal thoughts too. Oh wait, I am a biromantic ace. Well, 21st century ain't perfect either, but at least my sexuality is recognized, for the most part. But not all of Andersen's tales end in a dramatic, bittersweet death. My personal favorite of Andersen's tales, in its originality, actually has a pretty feminist message if you take a look at it closely. Literally, the heroine is no bigger than a thumb. Thumbelina, or Little Tiny, was published in 1835 in Copenhagen, Denmark, as part of a collection of fairy tales. It was likely inspired by the English folktale Tom Thumb about another character who was no bigger than a thumb, except Tom Thumb is a boy and Thumbelina is a girl. You may know Don Bluth's 1994 animated feature version, which I will go into detail, but we'll first cover the original tale. Before we begin, I'd like to thank my $5 plus patrons, Cosmic Trail, Bella PinkSavage, Arvin Joshua Rocks 15, and TyrannosaurusVenom. You too can become a patron by pledging to patreon.podbean.com/beautiesandbeasts or follow the link in the description. Note that monthly e-cards for patrons has been hereby discontinued due to the Hallmark e-card site closing down. Sorry, no website, no e-cards. You can also support my podcast by buying merchandise on Redbubble. I recently added a new design with the slogan, I survived 2020, to mark the first year of the COVID-19 epidemic. If you're still around, consider it an accomplishment that you've made it this far. You can get this on over 80 different products, from masks to clothes, to stationery, to home decor, and more. Just go to DisneyFanatic23.redbubble.com. That's DisneyFanatic23.redbubble.com. We're not out of the woods yet. Even if you're vaccinated like me, you should still wear your mask just in case. And you can get a cool design on your mask off of Redbubble. For each mask sold, one will be donated to Heart to Heart International. So, Thumbelina starts with an old single woman who wants a child. Again, one day she visits a fairy or witch, depending on what translation you read, and asks for a child, and the fairy gives her a piece of barley corn. Instructions: plant it in a flower pot, and when it grows, kiss its petals, and you'll have the child you've always wanted. Yeah, this is before we had sperm donors and adoption agencies. The tulip grows overnight, and the lonely woman kisses its petals. The flower opens up, and a tiny, itty-bitty girl pops out, no bigger than a thumb, hence the name Thumbelina. So, the lonely woman is less lonely. Not only is Thumbelina beautiful, but gifted with a lovely singing voice. Hey, kind of like The Little Mermaid. I'm sensing a trend here, Andersen, with your heroines. One night, an ugly mother toad appears on the windowsill where Thumbelina sleeps. Thinking that she'll make a good wife for her son, she kidnaps Thumbelina and takes her to the pond and imprisons her on a lily pad. Thumbelina wakes up and sees the mother toad and her son and finds herself suddenly engaged. Of course, Thumbelina is like, no way! Not just because it's a toad, but come on, she was kidnapped. I'd say no too. Sadly, though, she can't swim and is very tiny, so she is not very strong. When the toads leave to prepare for the wedding, some fish come by to Thumbelina's aid and they gnaw at the stem of the lily pad so she can float away. She later gets help from a butterfly, tying her girdle to the butterfly and to the leaf so she can be pulled further down the stream and faster. So, Thumbelina is very resourceful. And then Thumbelina is swept away by a big cockchafer. No, not what you think. That's just another word for a bug or a beetle, depending on what translation you read. This is the problem with translations. Everything gets, lost in translation. We'll just call him the beetle for simplicity's sake. The beetle takes Thumbelina and she pleads that they go back and free the butterfly from the lily pad or else he'll starve. But the beetle ignores her, gives her some honey to eat, and says she's very pretty. And then he shows Thumbelina off to his beetle friends, but they all say she has no feelers and is so skinny and looks like a human. She is so ugly. And because of peer pressure, the beetle believes that Thumbelina must really be ugly and so lets her go. Beauty is subjective, I suppose. The seasons go by and Thumbelina finds ways to care for herself, building a shelter from leaves and sucking honey from flowers and drinking dew. But when winter comes, all of her natural resources are, naturally, frozen. In seeking shelter, she comes across a burrow where a field mouse lives. Miss Field Mouse takes Thumbelina in and says that she can stay for winter as long as she keeps her home neat and tells her stories and keeps her company. Not a bad deal, right? Every week, Mrs. Field Mouse is visited by her neighbor, who is a mole and has a much bigger home than hers and wears a lovely black velvet coat. And Mrs. Field Mouse says that he would make a good husband for Thumbelina who will provide for her, even if he is blind. The mole visits and he complains about the sun and the flowers because he's never seen them, contrary to Thumbelina's opinion on sunshine in spring. But Thumbelina still sings for him to be polite, and the mole slowly falls in love with her pretty voice, but doesn't say anything yet. At least he doesn't rush things like her previous suitors. The mole shows Thumbelina and the field mouse a tunnel that he made where a dead swallow lays. The mole says it serves him right for doing nothing but tweeting all day. Yeah, I'm looking at you, Twitter users. Just kidding. But Thumbelina takes pity on the swallow and comes back at night and warms him up. Turns out he's not dead after all, just frozen. But he cannot fly away until springtime. So she secretly takes care of him in the winter, and by spring he's strong enough to fly and offers to take Thumbelina with him. But she decides it would be rude to leave the field mouse so suddenly after being so kind to her. The swallow flies away, and one day the field mouse announces that Mr. Mole has asked for Thumbelina's hand in marriage. But she doesn't like him and refuses. But the mouse says that she will not find a richer match, and she shouldn't be so ungrateful. Oh, yeah, right, because this is all about you. So, wedding preparations are underway, and the date is fixed for the end of summer. On the wedding day, Thumbelina goes to the hole in the tunnel one last time to say goodbye to the sunshine. And who should show up but the swallow? This time, she doesn't hesitate to hop on his back and fly away. They fly to the warmer countries in the south, and the swallow tells her to make herself a home out of flowers. And then she sees a tiny little winged man sitting in a great white flower, known as a flower angel or a fairy. She thinks he's beautiful and just her size. The prince is frightened of the giant bird, but then sees Thumbelina, and then asks if she will be his wife. And she accepts, even though it's really speedy. They have a wedding, she's given wings, and her name is changed to Maya because it's prettier. And the swallow, sad his friend left, flies to Denmark and comes to the window of a certain storyteller and sings the story of Thumbelina. Yeah, I see what you did there, Andersen. Fourth wall break. So, there have been a few movie adaptations and TV adaptations, from fairy tale theater's version starring Carrie Fisher to a Brazilian version in HBO's Happily Ever After series with Rosie Perez, and of course the most well-known being Don Bluth's animated feature film starring Jodie Benson, who you may recognize as the voice of Ariel, the Little Mermaid, another Andersen tale, which I think is fitting because there's no voice like Jodie Benson's. Her voice is a gift from God. And fun fact, the Fairy King in Thumbelina is Kenneth Mars, who voiced King Triton. I have a feeling they did that on purpose. Don Bluth's version follows the original tale closely. Chief differences being, we meet the fairy prince earlier in the story, so he's not just there at the end and it's just a whole, oh, you're beautiful, will you marry me rush job. And when Thumbelina is kidnapped, he searches for her. So, he's really dedicated. And we see more of the Toad and the Beetle and their more prominent villains in the story as a scheme to get Thumbelina back. And the Swallow shows up earlier too, creating a plot hole of why he didn't just fly Thumbelina back home in the first place. Oh, come on, the original story had a better explanation than this, Don Bluth. Not to mention, the movie has beautiful songs. I used to rent this all the time for Blockbuster Video, to be a kid in the 90s. And this was the movie that taught me at a young age that if you should ever marry someone, it must be someone you love. Not just someone who's like, hey, marry me, let's go. Now, let's break the story down. At its core, I believe Thumbelina was meant to represent women and their very, 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 very small role in the world of the 1800s. And prior to that. Thumbelina is literally small, and because of that, she gets easily thrown around by large creatures who see her as valuable because she's beautiful and talented. But they think that she has no right to come up with any decisions herself. 3 times she finds herself in an arranged courtship with a beastly character, a toad, a beetle, then a mole. To her, they are ugly and monstrous, not just because of their looks. The first one kidnaps her, or rather the mom does, and imprisons her so she'll marry him. Lesson 1 in picking up girls: don't imprison them, and don't have your mom arrange things for you. She'll do it wrong. The beetle literally picks Thumbelina up and doesn't talk of marriage, but is essentially looking for arm candy to show off to his friends, until they say she's ugly. Lesson 2, don't let others decide who is good enough for you. And then there's the mole, who is not exactly a bad guy in comparison to the others. He waits before proposing to Thumbelina, but his mistake was asking Miss Fieldmouse and not her, when Miss Fieldmouse really has no right to pawn Thumbelina off to somebody else. Lesson 3, ask the girl, not her parents or surrogate guardians. And yes, while the mole is rich and educated and well-mannered, he and Thumbelina have nothing in common, and he wants to keep her confined underground. And actually, if you watch the end credits of the Don Bluth film, you'll see that the mole actually ends up marrying Miss Fieldmouse, which makes me wonder why that didn't happen in the first place. And of course, there is one thing that all these suitors have in common, is that they never asked Thumbelina for her opinion. This used to be the case for women. They'd have no say in what to do with their lives, especially where marriage was concerned, and actually still is the case for women in some cultures these days. Is it just me, or is Andersen the only traditional fairy tale writer, male at least, who knew what kind of crap women were put through? I knew he was my favorite for a reason. And of course, you can argue this isn't as feminist as it sounds because the heroine gets married at the end rather quickly too. And because the prince is beautiful. Okay, yes, slightly backwards saying looks are the only important thing in a relationship, but you're missing the metaphor here. What made Thumbelina say yes to the fairy prince was that he was a lot like her. And, most importantly, he's the only suitor to ask her what she wants. And then, he gives her wings to symbolize her freedom and their equality in marriage. As for the name change, from Thumbelina to Maya, shows a change in her identity. Kind of like in The Ugly Duckling, where he becomes a swan, and then, of course, the Little Mermaid becoming human. Like I said, Andersen's tales have lots of LGBTQ undertones. Thumbelina was an outcast for being a tiny human, and it wasn't until she found someone like her who respected her opinions and loved her for who she was that she was able to fit in and spread her wings, literally, and rise above her difficult situation. You have to admit, it's a happier ending than The Little Mermaid. Guess this was when Andersen had a bit more hope that someday he'd find his prince or princess who'd take him as he was and make him feel beautiful. Really, Thumbelina's situation could be used as a symbol for any minority who feels like they have less power in the world. Best summed up in a quote from the Don Bluth film, "There's no place in this world for little people. We cannot do impossible things." But this story shows that we can, if we follow our hearts and not let other people tell us what we can and can't do. And note that, in the end, Thumbelina didn't have to change herself to be happy with a man, but added more to what she already was. Love can turn you into a bigger person of yourself, or simply finding someone who supports you, like the swallow. Anyway, that's why I love this out of all of Andersen's tales. It taught me to make my own choices. If I ever fall in love, let it be someone who respects me, and you have the right to say no. Also, toads, beetles, and field mice are jerks. And you shouldn't be with someone who's forceful or rude or controlling. Just say no. It's your life. Live it how you want. Alright, so that is all the notes I have today. If anybody in the chat here has something they'd like to add. Oh, and PinkSavage says, yeah, beat the system. Yeah, you should not let people control your life. Now, you too can join these private chats by becoming a patron of at least $10 a month, and you can add your 2 cents to each discussion. Alright. And Cosmic Trail says, this is a little too early to ask, but is there going to be any Beauties and Beasts episodes related to prom for next month? Do you mean like prom as in the dance in general, or do you mean... Okay, there's 2 things I know that are called prom. There's Prom the movie, and then there's like this TV series called Prom that's new. Can you be more specific there, Cosmic Trail? Oh, Enveloping Savage. I mean, we already got Carrie. Yeah, I talk about Carrie in a private patron episode. And I also talked about it on a very short-lived series with my co-host Nellie called Lit or Misses. So I've already covered Carrie in the best way I can. I don't think I know any. Though specifically, I don't think I know any prom stories. Yeah, just any school dance from whatever series. Yeah, not that I know of. Yeah, I've never been to a prom. We had a senior dinner dance, but I don't think it's a prom you guys have in mind because it was pretty much an end of the school dance where we invited all our families to a dinner and we celebrated. So I guess you could say I took my brother to prom and I felt no shame in it. Okay. Oh, by the way, I'm very sorry for last week. I was going to do this podcast last week, but unfortunately I was come down with some spring allergies and I wasn't able to talk very long. Oh, Enveloping Savage, we canceled our prom. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, the epidemic right now, I bet a lot of proms are either canceled or they have some fancy social distancing way to do it. Oh, thank you, Bella. Yeah, you worried us for a sec there, LOL, but glad you're doing good. Yeah, thank you. Sorry for canceling last week and not giving you updates. All right. Anyone have anything else to add before I announce the next episode? Oh, okay. Yeah, you guys were worried. Sorry. Okay, nope, I'm good. Have a great rest of your life, says PinkSavage. Okay. Well, next episode, we'll be covering a book and movie series that will be cringy for most, but must be covered as the heroine has to decide between 2 beasts, both very unhealthy choices. And this was the other topic that was tied for first place in the last poll of Thumbelina. And that is Stephenie Meyer's The Twilight Saga. Come on, millennials, as cringy as it is, you know you've all read and or watched it at some point. Oh, and as Bella PinkSavage calls it, oh no, the fairy tale dating game. Yeah. Okay, so that will be for next time, and yes, it will be in 2 weeks. Barring nothing goes awry. So, be sure to show your support, become a patron, buy merchandise in Redbubble, and get vaccinated and wear your masks, okay? I can't stress it enough. Wear those masks.